There's this really interesting poem in the book of Isaiah that talks about beautiful feet. So Jerusalem, the spiritual homeland of the Jewish people, has been destroyed by a powerful empire called Babylon. Most of the people were sent away from their homeland as captives. Some of the poor people were left in the city to care for the land. And everyone is wondering, what in the world just happened?
Wasn't Jerusalem supposed to be the city where God would rule and bring peace and blessing to the world?
That's why the people were so confused. They felt like God had abandoned them.
Yeah, everything is destroyed.
The prophet Isaiah had been telling everyone that living corrupt lives and turning away from God would lead to this very thing.
Isaiah's warnings came true.
But the poem isn't over. It goes on to say that there's a watchman on the city walls who spots a messenger far out in the hills. The messenger is running toward the city, shouting, "Good news! Good news!" That's when Isaiah says how beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news.
What exactly does that mean?
The feet are beautiful because they are carrying a beautiful message.
What's the message?
That even though Jerusalem had been destroyed, God still reigns as king, and he will come back to the city one day, sit on his throne, and bring peace.
So the watchmen sing for joy because of the good news that God is still king.
Right. Now jump over to the New Testament. We see the same phrase, good news, which is the Greek word evangelion. You might hear it with the word gospel.
So when Christians say, "Do you believe the gospel?" they mean, do you believe the news?
Not just any news. In the Bible, this phrase is always about announcing the reign of a new king.
King Jesus.
Right. And in the New Testament, this phrase is used to summarize all of Jesus' teachings. They say he went about spreading the good news of God's kingdom.
So, Jesus saw himself as the messenger bringing the good news.
But the way Jesus described God's reign was very different from what people were expecting.
What were they expecting?
When you think of the successful kingdom, what do you think of?
Strength, power, a kingdom that can destroy its enemies.
But Jesus said the greatest in God's kingdom was the weakest.
The greatest is the weakest? That doesn't make sense.
It does when you understand what God values. Jesus said the greatest is the one who loves and serves the poor. That living under God's rule means loving your enemies, forgiving them, and seeking peace.
Which is really different from the ways we act sometimes.
God's kingdom is an upside-down kingdom because it operates by a completely different set of values.
Upside-down kingdom. I like that.
There's this really interesting story about a Roman officer who begs Jesus to heal someone in his house. He even bows down and calls Jesus his Lord.
A powerful Roman officer bowing to Jesus.
And here's what's interesting. Jesus acknowledges what this man recognized, something that no one else did. That not only was Jesus announcing God's kingdom, he was the king. Jesus appointed 12 disciples,
which are an image of Israel's 12 tribes.
Jesus went around healing people and forgiving them of their sins. And the religious leaders of Israel were so upset by everything Jesus was doing that they decided to stop him
by having him killed.
And here's the thing, Jesus let them.
Hold on, he let them? That's a weird thing to do if you're trying to become king.
For Jesus, this is what had to happen. Jesus saw the sin of his people, Israel, as just one small part of the big human problem.
That all of mankind has rebelled against God and caused devastation over our whole world.
So how is God going to bring his reign over this kind of corrupt world?
By a tragic act of sacrificial love for his enemies.
Jesus' death on the cross.
Which is why the Gospels describe Jesus' death as his way of becoming the true king of the Jews.
He gets a crown, a robe. He's lifted up, not onto a throne, but onto a cross. How beautiful on the mountains are the feet of those who bring good news. And the good news now is that Jesus has defeated death. He is alive and he is the true king.
He conquered our sin through his life, his death, and his love.
Jesus sends out his followers to keep announcing the good news of the upside-down kingdom.
And to invite everyone to accept Jesus as their king.
The true king who defeated death with his love.
So when people talk about believing the gospel, they mean the good news that Jesus is king.
That's right. And the reason this is good news is because Jesus is such a good, loving, and just king. and he invites everyone to be part of his upside-down kingdom by following God's ways.
We call it the upside down kingdom because God's values are completely different from the world's.
Right, like when Jesus says, love others, even your enemies.
Jesus said the greatest in his kingdom is not the one with the most power, money, popularity.
He said the greatest is the one who acts like a servant, the one who loves and helps others in need.
This is a completely different way to live.
Being committed to Jesus means learning from him and actually doing what he teaches.
When we follow Jesus, we are acting as true citizens for God's kingdom.